Hi, today we're going to talk about picking and choosing your rules to make the perfect game for you. Over the years, I've collected a lot of game systems, and most of them are long dead. A lot of them had some good rules in them. Many of them were just put out by small companies. And just like making a sandwich or ordering a sandwich and you get pickles on it, you can take the pickles off or whatever. There's a lot of good ideas in some of these rules. And you can sort of pick and choose a little bit, but most of these game systems are dead. You guys who have backed multiple Kickstarters, you're going to wind up with a closet that looks like this, filled with stuff at some point, because they come and go. And this one was actually put out by an X Games Workshop employee, and he even had his own magazine called Red Giant. The first major one I think that I got into was Battle System, which is affiliated with Dungeons and Dragons, and this came out in the 80s. This has a campaign system that went with it and just a battle book. It included little cardboard bases that you could use as stand-ins for models, and I actually used these for some of the bases for my first Warhammer armies. Later on, it expanded. It came out with another edition. There was a skirmish version, I believe, that came out. Second edition of the main version, skirmish version. Then later on, it came out as pre-painted miniatures. So the system stayed around for a while and evolved. The main one that I got into was Warhammer. So I got into a second edition. The shop owner sold me this about 2 weeks before third edition came out. I think he knew it was coming and tried to pawn this off on me. The second edition was pretty good. It came with a little cardboard stand-in, some scenario books, 3 booklets of rules, and it's a good miniatures war system. And the Ravening Hordes was the army list that came with it, where you're introduced to the standard core troops and things of that nature. You know, you get so many of these guys and you get so many of these guys, and it introduced heroes, major and minor heroes. Second edition is a pretty decent system if you can get hold of it. It also included scenario packs because it was a scenario driven game. Just like the Dungeons and Dragons one, this was designed, game masters would set up a game. It wasn't so much just tournaments and competitions. Typically one guy would have all the miniatures to play, and so this was the Macbeth scenario pack that came with it. It was more of a narrative-driven game. Then came third edition. Third edition came out in the late 80s, and it came with a companion army list later on. Third edition was frequently referred to as Old Hammer, and it had a lot of expansions on some different rules, and it introduced a lot of nice things to the system, and a lot of people love third edition. But then shortly thereafter, this appeared at my game shop. This is introducing the Arabian Nights. So yes, this was the emergence of Magic the Gathering in the early 90s. Magic the Gathering introduced a new paradigm in gaming of fast games and loads of special rules. The cards all had the special rules on them, and the idea was to get the game completed quickly so you could go on to a tournament. And just like in music, this used to be cool, then this came out and changed everything, and then all of a sudden this looked ridiculous. So Magic the Gathering had an enormous influence, in my opinion, on game developers that came afterwards. It was special rules, it was building a deck, which equated to building an army, and it was fast play. You wanted to get the games over quickly. There was a strong tournament emphasis in Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering was a great game. I played it a lot, which is why I skipped 4th and 5th edition Warhammer. But it just grew unwieldy, and it became something that I grew bored with. So this is an example of the change. This was WRG 7th edition, which had the greatest command control system I've ever seen, with wings and different stances for your armies and attack orders and hold orders, and it was replaced by DBA, where you simply roll a dice and that's how many guys you move. I hate games with command control systems that are just roll a dice and that's how you move. So around 2000, Warhammer 6th edition came out, and it was accompanied by Ravening Hordes, which is a army list for all of the available armies at the time. This is a really nice combination. If you just play 6th edition with Ravening Hordes, you're going to have some great games. A guy ran a league at the store, and it was wonderful. They supplemented it with some Chronicles, some Annuals, General's Compendium, lots of expansion rules for naval games and things like that. So this system is well supported. There's a lot of materials you can buy with it, and it's a good well supported system. A lot of people played 6th edition, but they couldn't stop. And the army books started coming out. And it's like two guys sitting in cubicles, and the one guy said, I just made the most unbeatable army ever, and the other guy said, hold my beer. They absolutely added so many ingredients to the soup that they poisoned it. It just became unwieldy. And all of these books contain special rules, and you better know them all, because if you don't, you're going to run into them at a game and just have your hat handed to you by some rule that you don't even know what it is, and it's really a lot of stuff to keep track of. The books are great for the fluff and the artwork and stuff like that, but it just killed it. Additional support for this is the fact that they came out with an entire range of historical supplements for it. So this is one example of this, and they're very compatible. So this system gives you a lot of flexibility. And then along came 8th edition. This is 8th edition with a big bull book. I'm skipping over 7th. 7th and 8th are similar in some ways. So here's your 3 choices to me if you're going to play Warhammer. The system is now dead. The company has killed it. They've talked about bringing it back. I don't know. You got 3rd edition, which is self-supported but may require a game master. You got 6th edition, lots and lots of support for that. And then you got 8th edition. Let's look at how combat differs between 6th edition and the other 3rd edition. So this is an example of 6th edition, a main combat, how it would go. The witch elves are approaching these orcs. You have to guess distances, and getting the charge is extremely important, because getting the charge allows you to strike first, and no one gets to strike back. So these witch elves get the charge. The idea is to inflict as many wounds as possible. Say they kill 3 guys. That means there's only a couple guys left to fight back. The orcs are outscored. Your break test is modified by the amount you lost by. They'll typically break, lose, they'll get caught, and they'll be destroyed. It's a very billiards type game. You hit one round, you wipe out the enemy. Fast resolution, whole units get lifted off based on charges. Let's examine 3rd edition, how combat goes. 3rd edition is it's a bit of a slower thing. So in 3rd edition, same situation, unit charges, and they fight around a combat. But the break test is not modified by the amount you lost by. So what happens is you get pushed back 2 inches, and you get pushed back 2 inches. And units with heavy armor will stay locked together turn after turn. There is no turn limit. So what you have to do is rely on maneuver. In this instance, the Dark Elves fly some Harpies behind. When you get pushed back, if you can't move, you automatically break. It relies a lot more on maneuver, and there's a lot of maneuvers in 3rd edition that you can make that you can't make in the other ones. But this is one example. Auto-breaking units is good. So 3rd edition has an army book. It's self-contained. It has a lot of special rules for like wedge, and everyone can use wedge because it's just a formation. Everyone can use square. There's not as many individual special rules. There are some, but like a War Dancers or whatever. But one of the things I like about it is if your Wolf Riders want to go into wedge, they can try it. They're not going to be as good as Knights, but they can try it. It's a good system. It's slower. And that brings to the point of Warhammer is not a fast thing. It's not intended for like nuggets through the window. It's you're making a meal of it. It's a hobby in itself. You collect and paint the models, and 3rd edition was back during that time when you would spend an afternoon, a rainy afternoon, enjoying a game. 6th edition is faster. I think it's much more suited for competitive play. There's not a need for a game master. It's very well suited. The army books butchered it. That's the problem with it, in my opinion, because they're not equally balanced, and then the overall emphasis on tournament play, weakened it. But it's still a good system. There were a lot of nice kits, multi-pose kits that were affordable, that were released back then. And, just sitting around in your little painting area, relaxing, painting and building your models, it still has a lot of merits. I just don't know how you're going to balance the books out. If you can get 6th edition and Ravening Hordes, that would be a good setup for you. It would be a really good setup. Then there's 8th edition. 8th edition is actually the core rules that I find the best because they've worked out a lot of the bugs. I like the random charges a lot because it's not just a matter of outguessing your opponent. I like the step-up rule, but I don't think the army books, there was never a compilation of all the army books in one. You're going to get a lot of, you're using 6th edition. Some of these people are using army books 10 years old or so. I don't know how that's going to work. There's a couple other options. One is this fan-based system called the 9th Age. I haven't played it. I've looked it over. I've downloaded and printed out the books. It seems very tournament-focused, and there are a lot of special rules. And to add to the confusion for me, I'm having a hard time remembering too many rules, as you can probably guess. They had to change the names of everything. So all of the Warhammer names that you're used to are now changed. I mean, it looks like a very tight system, but for tournaments. So I don't know if it's narrative emphasis or not. And it's, this goes back to the whole thing. You're going to have a good game of 3rd edition if you set it up with a game master and he says, oh, I'm going to take out frost blades and no cannons and no chariots because those rules are broken, or works out some solutions. With this, I think that they tried to eliminate the need to do that. They covered as many rules as possible. It's all downloadable for free. Well supported. They got a forum. They have tournaments they run in Europe. There's a local store to me that plays that a lot. And there's also something called the Warhammer Armies Project, which is different in that this guy produced army books for every 8th edition army. And they're also downloadable for free. But he even went further and refined the rules to his taste and created his own 9th edition rules and then made 9th edition army books for everything. I really admire what this guy did. Absolute kudos. If Games Workshop was smart, they would just hire him and just publish everything he's done and be done with it. The Armies Project includes the armies that they don't even have. So there you have it. That's Warhammer soup. It's really up to you to decide what you want to do with it, but there's nothing official anymore. It's gone, and whether or not it just becomes forgotten, like the pile of rules that I threw out in the beginning of the video, or stays alive is really up to the hobbyists. So you can do with it what you will. I hope this overview has given something to think about for people, new players that might be interested and just curious about Warhammer in general. It is a lot. It's been out for 30-some years. It's been through multiple evolutions, and you don't just have to pick the type of rules. I think one of the things you're going to have to contend with is the type of game you want to play, whether it's a narrative, quote, fluff army or a hardcore tournament army. And the two really are incompatible. I know that I sometimes get quite frustrated sometimes, because if you're a fluff narrative player and you try to play a game with a hardcore tournament player, you're not going to enjoy it. You're going to get frustrated, and frequently they just give up and just get out of the hobby because there's just not that's not what they came for. And likewise, I've had tournament players get angry with me because I bring this fluff list, and they get kind of frustrated that I didn't bring some really hardcore list. I actually was insulted by a store manager one time because I suggested running a campaign in the store based on lower point level, and he read me page 5 of the War Machine book and pretty much called me a wimp and told me to get lost. But there is definitely a difference there, and I just want to warn you in advance that if you get into the hobby and you play a game and you get killed in turn 2 by I used to play with this guy, and he played Demons of Chaos where he had all Khorne guys, and I played my High Elves. And in turn 2, I think he won. It was a 2,000 point game, but he won 2,400 to nothing by capturing standards and table quarters in turn 2. I didn't have a good time, so I built a list tailored against him, and we played again with my Dark Elf list, and I won like 2,000 to nothing in 2 turns. If you want to do that, that's fine, and there are a lot of people who want to do that, and I'm not trying to criticize them. I'm just saying that doesn't suit me at all, and I'm just wanting to inform people that get into Warhammer that there are two completely different schools of thought. Just be aware of that. You can have a good time if you're a narrative player, if you play narrative. If you play heavy tournament, you can have a good time. If you try to mix the two, I don't think you're going to enjoy yourself very much. I've actually gone to tournaments with my fluff list just to look at other people's painting, and enjoyed that aspect of it quite a bit. And just, you know, the camaraderie and stuff like that. I would lose, but it was fine because I knew what I was getting into. So what I'm trying to say is, just be aware when you're making your soup for your game that you want to play, the flavor you put into it is going to determine what you get out of it. I think these games started off, like I said, with the Dungeons and Dragons battle system type thing. They were a role-playing thing, and then through the evolution and the impact of Magic the Gathering with the special rules and tournaments, they've evolved into something a lot more involved, so to speak, a lot more competitive, tournament driven, and that's fine. I have respect for those guys. I admire the work that they put into it. They put a lot of effort into it. It's just, personally, it's not for me, and you have to be aware of that if you're going to get into this hobby, that you have to decide what branch you want to get into and how you want to pursue it. So just keep that in mind. It's a neat hobby. The other thing I think that's happened too is that a lot of the earlier games when I was younger were by very small companies. They weren't you know, corporate traded. They didn't have to please shareholders and stuff like that. So it was a little bit more of a fan-based thing, which is what I really admire about the Ninth Age and the Warhammer Armies project. Those people are passionate about the hobby. They're not doing it for any reason other than that they just like doing it, which is kind of something that I tend to admire. And hopefully you can get an idea of the type of game you want to play and how, what you want to pick and choose. I really think if you went with third edition Armies and just worked on a couple of rules to tweak it, maybe pick a few things out of 8th edition, you'd have a good system. If you went with 6th edition and Ravening Hordes, just straight out of the box, you're going to have a good system. You're going to have some good games. Again, if you want to pick a couple of things like Step Up Rule and Variable Charges from 8th edition, you're going to have a good game. That's a good system. If you want to play 8th edition and use the Warhammer Armies project army list from that website, you're going to have a pretty good system. There'll be a lot of special rules you have to you know, learn and memorize, and hopefully they won't overwhelm the game, but you know, you'll have a good system there. So you have a lot of options. And now that the system's dead, most of the stuff's on eBay. You're not spending a lot of money, and you can get a nice little hobby for a little bit of outlay and a little bit of work. Okay, sorry I've rambled on with this thing, but it's gone a little bit overboard, so I'm going to sign off. So thanks for watching.